Hello, fellow readers and booktubers. This is the BookTube Embarrassment tag. This was an original tag created by Andy at Really Random Reads. Andy had tagged my friend Pat at Book Chat with Pat, who was also tagged by Kevin at Kevin Toll Reads, who's also a friend of mine. And at any rate, this is these are my responses to the prompts. And it has to do, all the prompts have to do with some embarrassing situations that might arise as a result of a book that you're reading, or just the act of reading particular books that might embarrass you in some way. Let me just preface this by saying I've reached a certain age where I don't get embarrassed easily anymore. I would guess I'm probably older than many of you. And hopefully someday you'll get to that point too, where you can just be who you are and read what you want to read and not have to worry about being embarrassed. But still, embarrassment does arise from time to time. And sometimes when I looked at some of these prompts, I can remember certain times when a particular book or something would cause me some embarrassment. So I'm drawing on some memory here. So anyway, the first prompt is, a book that someone or something made you feel embarrassed about liking. I've got a little bit of a sob story to go along with this one. Some of you might be surprised to know that I do not come from a bookish family. The family I grew up in might be too much to say they were anti-intellectual, but in some ways they were. The idea of reading books was seen as odd or questionable. I did have a cousin who loved to read. He was a couple years older than me, and I think he's still alive. I shouldn't talk about him in the past tense. But when I was a kid, I really looked up to him, and he loved to read. And because of that, I developed a love for books. But for the most part, the people, the family that I come from, they're not readers of books. And as I began to acquire books, and even as an adult, I have these bookcases filled with books. And when some of these relatives would come to visit me, they would look at the bookcases and just kind of squinch up their noses like, what are these? Why are you reading these books? I married into a family of people that are most certainly intellectuals, doctors and lawyers, but there are some people among my in-laws who are techies. And as far as they're concerned, if it's not math or science, it's a waste of time. And so these books mean nothing to them. And in fact, the fact that I'm on BookTube is an occasion for them to ridicule me in some odd way. So when the question is a book that someone or something made you feel embarrassed about liking, for some people in my family and some among my in-laws, that's every book I have and every book I've ever read. That's my sob story. Fortunately, I have friends who love to read. The love of reading is something I was able to pass on successfully to my children. They love to read, and so they never make me feel embarrassed about the books that I read. And so there's some relief there. Prompt number 2, a book you're embarrassed about completely missing the point of. When I was in graduate school, I was majoring in history. In my specialty field, I had 2 of them. One was medieval history, the other was ancient Roman history. And for those of you who have never had the experience of graduate school and the study and the deep study of history, essentially what you do is you just read a lot of books. And for many courses, you'll be asked to read 3, 4, 5 books a week, deep reading with a lot of notes. And at the end of the week, you're expected to sit down with your fellow scholars and discuss these books in some detail with some insight. And these courses, are the other students in the course, there'll only be a few, maybe 3 or 4 of you, and then the professor who's kind of guiding the discussion. So there's no way you can hide behind anybody. You've got to read the books, and you must have something interesting to say. There were a couple of books that had to do more with the philosophy of history than actual history itself, or historiography. And there were a couple, I remember one book in particular, I had no idea what was going on in that book. And I had to read it quickly because I was going to be discussing it with some other students, some of my fellow students at the end of the week. And I read it, and I read some pages over and over again. This was incredibly abstract, and I didn't get it. And so the end of the week comes, and I'm sitting down at a big table with my fellow classmates, and there's our professor, And we get to that one book, and everyone had something to say about it. Everybody seemed to understand it but me. And finally, the professor looked at me and said, well, what have you got to say about this? And I said, I'm sorry, I don't understand what this book was about. And for some reason, the professor and my fellow classmates all had mercy on me, and we just kind of moved to another topic. But that was deeply embarrassing. When it comes to fiction, though, one of the things about fiction, and really good fiction, is like any work of art, it's open to a lot of interpretations. I might read a novel and find something in it that you might not see, but you might find something unique to your experience of reading that novel that I've completely missed. There's no reason for either one of us to be embarrassed. A good novel can be open to a lot of different interpretations. You might even, find something in a novel that the author did not even intend. If I've read a really good novel and I'm discussing it with someone else and they point out something that I didn't notice, I don't feel embarrassed by that. And if I point out something a fellow reader has missed, there's no reason for them to feel embarrassed about that. It's the glories of really good fiction. Prop number 3, a book you've been embarrassed or would be embarrassed to be seen reading in public. And prop number 4 kind of goes along with this one. A book you'd be embarrassed or hesitate to buy in person. Again, I'm at a point in my life where I don't get embarrassed that easily. And I don't know if I've ever really been embarrassed about being seen reading any particular book or buying any book in person. I figure if it's a book I'm interested in, I'm going to read it. And if you don't like it, it's not my problem. And, I didn't ask your opinion of it, so I'll read whatever I want to read. I've always been kind of stubborn in that regard. So that's prompts 3 and 4. I've got nothing for you there. A book you've been embarrassed not to like. Again, if I don't like a book, I just don't like it. If I meet people who do like it, I'm not interested in getting into a big argument about it. I don't feel embarrassed. I kind of keep my mouth shut about it. But no, there's never been a book that I've been embarrassed not to like. A book cover you find embarrassing. There's 2 kinds of things about book covers. One of them, a lot of books, especially bestsellers, will have stickers on the covers. It'll say something like winner of the Pulitzer or winner of the Booker Award or something like that. I have no problem with that. But there are some books, and in fact, I'm reading one right now, and there's a sticker on the cover, a little one, and it says something like the choice of the Oprah Book Club. And I might lose some subscribers for this, but I'm not a fan of Oprah. I never have been. I've always been a little suspicious of her. I think she's kind of a phony. And so when I'm reading a book and if it's got an Oprah sticker on it, that's a little embarrassing for me because I don't want anyone to think I'm one of Oprah's followers because I most certainly am not. So I don't like that. That's kind of embarrassing. But more than that, if you have a novel that's been made into a movie, and this is something I've mentioned in previous posts, and I know other people have mentioned this too. A wonderful novel, it'll be made into a movie, and then they'll release a new edition of the novel that's meant to be a tie-in to the movie. And on the cover, they'll show a scene from the movie. Sometimes an image of the star of the movie will be on the cover of the book. I'm not a worshiper at the altar of celebrity. I don't have favorite movie stars or anything like that. And that's, if you have a book like that has been made into a movie and there's a scene from the movie on the cover, especially if it's a close-up of the star of the movie, that can be a little embarrassing. I think people might think that you're reading that book because you like that particular celebrity when it has nothing to do with it. So that inadvertently can be embarrassing. A book this is prompt number 7. A book or books you feel embarrassed not to have read. I can think of one immediately. One leaps to mind. This is a book that I think everyone on BookTube has read. I think everybody who reads books has read this book but me. And I'm embarrassed that I have not read it, and that's Jane Eyre. I plan on rectifying this soon, hopefully before the end of this year, but I'm a little embarrassed I've never read that book because it sounds like it's wonderful and the kind of thing I might enjoy. And it's just that it seems like everybody has that on their list of one of their favorite books, or certainly a book that they read and that really moved them or touched them in some way. Number 8, an author or genre you're embarrassed to like or have been embarrassed to like. Here's another question. I don't have an answer for that one. I'm not embarrassed about any author that I like to read or any genre that I like to read. I read what I like, and I just, it's like being with a friend. I'm not embarrassed to be seen with my friends. I'm not embarrassed to be seen reading a particular book by an author that I like or a genre that I enjoy reading. So I've got nothing there. Number 9, show us or tell us something about an embarrassing bookish object. I looked at Pat from Book Chat with Pat. I watched her post on this one and how she responded to these prompts. And when she got to that one, she was kind of baffled. And I'm a little baffled too. I don't know what a bookish object would be unless this is referring to, a bookmark. Some people have very fancy bookmarks and all of that. But outside of that, I'm not sure what a bookish object is. And so I've got nothing to tell you about. That's all I've got to say for prompt number 9. Prompt number 10, what words, sounds, or phrases do you feel embarrassed about using on BookTube or in life? When I first started making videos for BookTube, I made the mistake of viewing them before I would post them. And it was I would hear myself hemming and hawing quite a bit. I noticed that I have a tendency to, if I'll use a word or a phrase, I think subconsciously I'll think, boy, that sounds pretty good, and I start using it over and over again in the same post. I teach college. I'm part of academia, and I give lectures. That's how I make my living. And so when I started viewing my first few posts, I thought, my God, is this what the students see? This is awful. This is embarrassing. So I just don't do that anymore. My students seem to like me. I've been doing it for over 25 years now. I like making BookTube videos, but I don't really need to watch myself embarrass myself. So, but I know I do hem and haw. That's kind of embarrassing. I think I've broken myself of that habit pretty well. It's the repeating certain terms or expressions. That's the one I would like to tackle. Although it is kind of odd. I'll have a post, and during the recording, I'll use a phrase, and I'll like the phrase, and I'll use it again and again and again in that post, and I'll never use it again in another post. So it's impossible to catch myself doing this unless I want to go back and severely edit my post and edit out a phrase that I keep repeating. But I'm not going to do that. I can live with that kind of embarrassment. Prompt number 11, tag others, and I most certainly will do that. So thank you, Pat, for tagging me on this. And Kevin, I think you tagged me. If you didn't, that's okay. I'm going to tag you then. But this was kind of fun. It was fun. I enjoyed it a great deal. This is the BookTube Embarrassment tag, and that's what I have for you today. Stay well, keep reading, and be strong.